I have to use my phone for everything. I don't want it to. And this is where, I think we'll probably delve into this later, but this is where biometrics really can help unlock a more deviceless future.
Welcome to The Future Of, a podcast by Fresh Consulting, where we discuss and learn about the future of different industries, markets, and technology verticals. Together, we'll chat with leaders and experts in the field and discuss how we can shape the future human experience. I'm your host, Jeff Dance. In this episode of The Future Of, we're joined by Micah Willbrand to explore the future of advanced biometrics. Welcome, Micah. It's a pleasure to have you with me on this episode. We're excited for you to share your vision of where things are going, your experience, and your knowledge with us.
Yep. Great to be here, Jeff. Super excited talking with you today.
Awesome. If you can start with telling the listeners a little bit more about yourself, your experience in advanced biometrics, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, sure. I've been in the identity and biometric market going on for more than 2 decades now. So it's been a little bit of a journey. Started off primarily focusing on data and the intersection of data around customer experience and working, which led me to working for lots of big companies, but also enabled me to work overseas and moved to the UK. Ended up living in the UK for 10 years. Just coming back recently, back to the States. But a lot of the roles that I had, really led through, sort of the journey that we've seen for customer experiences and customer onboarding, both from a regulatory point of view to enable, know your customer type requirements, but then also customer experience type relationships. So the likes of LexisNexis, working with them, working on, payments and authentication of payments with a subsidiary called Acuity, and then working with a financial crime provider called NICE Actimize, which is doing, loads of cool things around fraud and identity and bringing all of those elements together, and kind of ended up leading that business for a bit before moving to be the managing director of the Experian UK identity business in 2018 to 2020. So, really enjoy, working with technology and analytics and the burgeoning, use of machine learning and AI. And now, came back to the States and with NEC, so the Japanese conglomerate. So here I'm the chief product officer and vice president for their identity business for enterprise, so non-governmental work. So I'm responsible for all applications that we have around biometrics as well as digital identity going into aviation, financial services, retail, all of those use cases that are out there and really, helping us broaden and innovate NEC's approach into those markets.
Your experience seems really deep. It's not, often that you have someone who's had a significant leadership role, across so many different companies in this field. So we're really grateful to have you here with us. One of the things that you had mentioned, having so many leadership roles, you had mentioned that you care about being a visionary leader, but also leading teams in a pragmatic way. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I think that's an important principle.
Yeah, well, I think where a lot of technology firms fail, especially big enterprises, is some companies are either too operationally focused. They've had a product, and I've worked in businesses like this where effectively everyone knows that you're a cash cow, right? It was technology that was built 15 years ago, and it's being used to fund other parts of the business. Perfectly reasonable reasons for companies to do that and work that way. But I've also worked with companies where they're selling something that the market's not going to accept for 5 or 6 years. Great technology. It's just the market's not quite ready. So I think, a lot of the roles that I've had and what I'm trying to instill at NEC and kind of the groups that I work with is really, being hyper-focused on the use cases that we're selling into and really finding not only the buyers, but where the consumer is part of this journey. We're a B2B company. We don't sell B2C, but if consumers, especially when you're dealing in biometrics and identity who have a whole host of questions. If they're not ready to be comfortable around, why am I using my face for this? Why am I using a fingerprint? Or what are you doing? That leads to a lot of issues. So we just want to make sure that, we're really focused on, one being producing products and services that are privacy and consent focused, but also, that are really going to make consumers and citizens' lives easier over the long run, and just really being focused on that rather than on focusing on the tech or just trying to just sell something to make some numbers.
Thank you. I think NEC is lucky to have you, given all of your experience, also your perspective. I don't know if the listeners know this, but NEC is probably the world's leader in sort of advanced biometrics. So it's great to have you to think about the future. There's so many things happening right now. The pandemic that we had, the confluence, like you mentioned, of AI, of machine learning, of computer vision, of the issues around borders and borders opening up or closing down, and access, and so many things that changed in the pandemic there, and then obviously technology marching along. I'm thrilled to be able to kind of explore this future with you. Before we do, I think it's be really good for the audience just to understand more of today. Like, where are we today before we really talk about the future? Can you, for those kind of unfamiliar with the term, can you tell us more about like what advanced biometric is, like biometrics is, and like what are some of the core components of like advanced biometrics that are commonly utilized?
Yeah. So, I think it's pretty straightforward. So biometrics, largely, I think most people from movies or whatever else in your day-to-day life you're kind of familiar with. You're familiar with fingerprinting, putting your fingers and the ink and rolling them on for people that are being booked going to jail or for other activities. You do, facial biometrics on your phone. And I think that's what most people are familiar with, is like accessing their devices or things like that.
A billion people probably do that with iPhones now, right? Like maybe 2 billion.
Yeah. Well, it's, like you said, pre-COVID, just the use of Apple Pay. I don't think people would be like, oh, I want to use my face to confirm a transaction. Now, especially in the States, it's secondhand. You don't even think about it that much anymore. And so, that's in one of the outgrowths of COVID is sort of that acceptance of sort of basic biometrics. I think when we talk about advanced biometrics, is really two factors. One is a lot of the biometric algorithms that are out there, regardless of what you're looking at, be it a retina or iris scan or face or voice or whatnot, in labs, have tremendous accuracy, 99.9999 like accuracy. The problems that often we see is that in the real world is not a lab. It's very messy. And so one of the aspects of advanced biometrics is just the significant improvement through analytics of cleaning up, just, getting rid of the noise that you would get in an image or that you would get in an audio file. And if anyone's seen that Google Pixel commercial that's out, you can kind of see that where Google is pitching, hey, we can remove blurs from your photos, or we can remove objects. And just imagine that 1,000 times better. And so that's where it's really enabled us to do it, to really push through and get better accuracy in the real world. But the second aspect is really just how do we get a biometric? Because really there's a bit of a barrier. You need a piece of hardware. You've got to have something to capture it. So we're seeing new techniques, one of which is called photoacoustic imaging. And that's through the use of lasers and ultrasound. And so in the future, we'll have what we call contactless fingerprints. So you won't have to press anything. It can be used on a phone, and it's using these combination of techniques to generate an image that's then put together through machine learning and AI type analytics to really draw out what's going through. So we're going to start to see a lot of changes around, how we capture that image, how machine learning goes about it, but then, different biometrics. I think one of the coolest things is we have a patent on an ear canal biometric. I didn't know that you actually had a singular ear canal print, but apparently we do. And so, like, if you have a headphone in or your AirPods, we can start to do something along that. So, just these changes and over the next decade that we'll start to see come in.
Nice. So instead of using my eyes, I maybe putting my ear to the side and have.
Yeah, it'd be a little weird. Put your ear to make the payment, but I think I think and where advanced biometrics really are going to come in, and you make a good point, is the smartphone world has really taken over. Your device really controls kind of your day to day. But I think, and you look at the manufacturers, devices probably are going to go away in 10 years. I can't. It drives me crazy. I have to use my phone for everything. I don't want it to. And this is where, I think we'll probably delve into this later, but this is where biometrics really can help unlock a more deviceless future.
Love to talk about that more. I think as we talk about the future, I envision, we've kind of over time we've gotten screens have gotten narrow, smaller, and it's like, but I envision the future being more invisible, right? And the only way for that to happen, for technology to be invisible, if it requires access to authenticate who you are, to give you the information and interact and engage, is for something natural, like something that doesn't require input, right? But that could be your voice, it could be your face, it could be your ear, it could be the way you're walking, it could be, you mentioned photoacoustic imaging for your fingerprints. It could be any of these things, but I think that's the gateway for like a more natural, experience in the future. But before we get there, I gotta stick a little bit more to the present. So like, what are some common use cases for biometrics today? I know there's things that have been done for a long time. You mentioned crime scenes, or getting booked into some place by having to give your fingerprints. But like, what on the outside of that kind of security sense? And I know there's a lot that happens in a security sense. I heard that NEC helped identify the Boston bomber with some of their tech, which is significant. But tell me more about like common use cases.
Yeah, so I think, and what we're really excited about is obviously government and security, as you mentioned, do quite a bit. And you've probably experienced this if you've traveled, into or outside of the United States. We help do the biometric matching for Border Patrol to ensure that the person entering the U.S. is the same person on the passport and leaving as well. So, I think a lot of people probably have experienced that and are now starting to see, an outgrowth in the aviation industry. So we started working directly with airports and airlines 4 or 5 years ago. And, now you're starting to see the crop up of this a little bit more. So, Delta has various gates at Detroit or Hartsfield-Jackson Airport in Atlanta where you can board with just your face. You're seeing this at TSA checkpoints in Dallas-Fort Worth as well. And, we're starting to see more of what we call a ticketless journey. So this is where, you can use your face and your ticket is assigned to your face. So, you can just walk onto the airplane. You don't need to fumble for your ticket or figure out how you get the QR code to scan and do all of that. So that's the one I think people probably will experience more in the real world. We talked a little bit earlier just about Apple Pay and using that. I mean, that's a facial biometric. That's an authentication method that they use to confirm a transaction. And we were talking a little bit about this too. But I think this is where we're really going to start to see an outgrowth. Fraud and chargebacks in the financial services industry is, hundreds of billions of dollars. It's just a real problem. And so, I think we're going to start to see more of that because of data breaches and all the data problems we have in the world, where, biometric authentication to confirm a transaction will really help clean that up and eliminate a lot of that fraud, a lot of waste in the corporate world as well. Just the various fraud schemes for, payments and whatnot. So that's, when we talk about non-security, what we're really seeing is really places where we see a lot of fraud and a lot of waste and day-to-day interactions. And then on the flip side is, how can I eliminate lines in a physical aspect? If I'm going to a stadium or whatnot, how can I make it easier so I can just walk into the stadium and, just be able to enjoy my time there as opposed to standing in a queue for a half hour, 45 minutes.
Not have gatekeepers essentially.
Yes, for sure.
Old technology.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I recently came in from an international trip just last week, and it was like one of the fastest ins I've ever experienced. I was like, I think they keep evolving, but I think part of that is with biometrics. And I was like, whoa, that's it? Just boom, I'm in. Yep. And go ahead.
I think when we did some testing, I think we're able to improve the process by 7 minutes on boarding a plane through the change to facial biometrics versus ticket. And so, if you're, airlines are all about efficiency now. I got to turn the plane, I got to turn it quickly. And, 7 minutes that's a 20 to almost 30% improvement for them. So, it's a significant time saver for them. So it's a lot of great, customer, experiences come from it.
Nice. I think, you talk about payments and I do a fair amount of large wires, and we've done a few acquisitions at Fresh Consulting. And so sometimes there's some large wire transactions and I'm like talking to someone over the phone, and I'm like giving them these numbers and I'm like, isn't there a more secure way to do this? I could envision how for payments, you could have like a progressive biometric path, right? Where it's you use multiple modes or something like that. But
that's where, when we talk about it, like you said, it's crazy, to send a $10 million wire transfer and, like the process today is a notary or, even in some aspects, you don't even need that. Like it's just confirmation on phone. And this is, a lot of companies get burned by this. There's a whole fraud called CEO fraud. So that's what we are when we do work with financial service companies, we do, what we call like a tier or multimodal approach where, if it's over a certain threshold, use a really strong facial biometric. If it's less, maybe a fingerprint or voice print or something else, just to kind of help give a better confirmation.
Yeah. One of my favorite classes in college was a fraud class, and surprisingly, I don't know why, but it was just fascinating how people did fraud. And I actually did an accounting degree. I typically don't tell people that I was once a CPA because then people don't like creative accountants, but because I've been in the creative space for the last 15 years, and even kind of led the creative side of our company for a period of time. But I had my background was sort of financial in education. And back then they were saying about 6% of companies' bottom line was going to fraud, on average. And so that's like how widespread it was. And I think now today it seems like it's worse because they have like entire, company, I don't know what the term would be, but these organizations in Malaysia and other countries that are just like, an empire built around, the fraud and defrauding people. And it works, so it's, and how people get forced into that. I've been reading lots of articles about that, but so being able to combat that, given how much our world is moving into kind of the pure technology digital realm. It's like, how do you combat that? And biometrics is part of that solution, right? A big part of that solution to say, hey, we can authenticate and know that you are you. Essentially.
For sure. Yeah. No, I always joke that fraudsters are not dumb. If they had actually put their talents toward more legal things, it would be amazing what the world would come to. But it's I think you're right. It's 6% is probably right, and it is. It's just the campaigns and the things they can do. It's just super easy. To just rip people off. So hopefully
the mobsters of today live in the dark web and in these these massive fraud-based organizations that are all like behind the scenes. I guess they were kind of behind the scenes back then, but it was a physical aspect versus a digital dark sort of aspect.
Definitely.
Amazing. So tell us, you hear a lot about concerns around ethics in this. Tell us more about like regulations or sort of guidelines and that govern kind of the use of advanced biometrics. I've been impressed with NEC's perspective on ethics, and that's why we've been interested in sort of partnering in the past. Whereas a lot of technology companies is like, free for all, like, they give you kind of free for all on their kind of biometrics as a service in a sense. But tell us more about your perspectives on that.
No, it's a super important topic. And, it's one of the barriers actually for the market to really accept it. Because, as I said, we're talking about advanced biometrics. And some of it is, consumers just, when they hear biometrics, the hair stands up on the back of their neck and like, what are they doing? And, when I talk to my family, my parents are like, are we turning into Minority Report? And, all those kinds of aspects. So one of the things that really attract me to NEC, because as you said, is in working with them, is that the aspects that they've been doing have been built with privacy, consent, and ethics from the beginning. A lot of companies that are out there that we won't name names, but have just been, let's grab some money until we get a fine, and then maybe we'll figure it out later. Working in, one of the core pillars of NEC is about responsible growth. It's about really improving the life for citizens and the life for consumers, and making that life easier, but not at the detriment of non-ethical business practices and selling on things that we shouldn't. So in terms of regulations, it's super important. And I think we're not seeing a holistic regulation come out, especially here in the States. There's not an overarching regulation around it. You see different movements in different parts of the world. The Western part of the world tends to have one approach to biometrics. When you see in the Eastern world, in Asia and in the Middle East a little bit, you see a different approach. And some of this is just down to cultural differences and how you work. But I think, most people, what we want to work on as we go forward is really just ensuring that one of the principles like we see in the GDPR data privacy regulation and Europe is, you only retain the data for what you need. You don't gather it for anything else. You ensure that you have consent and the consumer has consent. And, one of the great things, and, I think we've seen this in some of the work that we've done together, with you and the team, Jeff, is in this design, how can we design the use of biometrics to enhance a citizen consumer experience, but do it in a decentralized way. The problem with a lot of systems that people are afraid of is, you have credit bureaus and other data providers out there that have these silos of data, which are honeypots for people to hack into. And so we've tried to go with an approach where the data would be stored locally, with the individual, and, would be encrypted. And, then the consumer is really choosing how they want to use that data. So if they're trying to sign up for, just a basic account at a retail site, maybe they only just give them their address and email. They don't have to give them their real name or date of birth, or confirm. So that's really, and I think that when we work with the market and we work with others in the market, there are definitely bad actors that are out there that, as you said, just want to make a buck, and do some bad things, which are bad for the overall industry. But, we're working very closely with other providers that have similar approaches to this market, to ensure that, we make sure that we, do the right thing, because if we have an opportunity here to do some really tremendous things for people's lives. And, we want to make sure that we don't, cause mistrust. And just really trying to focus on that. Yeah.
One example of that I had learned in reading a bit more about some of the case studies that you guys have is, how you guys have helped India as a country basically keep an identity, because people sometimes don't get an identity when they're born, like outskirts of town. And so how do you help people from the get-go know that, oh yeah, these people have had their, vaccines or immunizations, and there's a record of that, right? Or you can't just lose your identity and lose everything. But I thought that was like a cool example of how you guys are, helping kind of countries around the world. But going back to this ethical aspect that we've been talking about, you mentioned privacy, kind of individual privacy, kind of consent. Also, having a decentralized versus centralized sort of honeypot, as you mentioned, for hackers to hack into. Those seem like kind of key principles that would appease a lot of people's concern with the use of all the novel use cases that could make our life a lot easier in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it, again, as we build and we continue to move forward, that's really, what we want to do It's as you mentioned in India, and ensuring, we do this for other countries as well, is that enrollment. We talk about the elimination of waste, and that's where it really can come in, because as you said, now we can start tracking who's gotten vaccines, who's gotten their immunizations. We're not giving people extras that don't need it, and ensuring that people get what they deserve. And you see examples like this all over the world. Like there was an example a few years ago in Pakistan where in the old days, and this is a payments use case, but this is what biometrics can help when we talk about citizen issues, is in the old days, the Pakistan police force would pay the sergeant, who would then distribute the funds to the police on his squad. But they shifted to direct payments. And then all of a sudden, these lowly police officers had a 40% boost in pay because the sergeants have been skimming money off the top. And that has a knock-on effect to corruption and bribery, right? Because people are getting what they want. And so now that we have this, and we're ensuring all the aid money is going to the right people at the right time, and you're eliminating, people skimming money off the top, be it 5-10%, that's, you're talking billions of dollars. We want to ensure we do that. And again, but we want to do it ethically. And that's, again, where we want to ensure that the citizens have control of their identity and are knowledgeable and give consent, that if you want to sell your picture for a marketing purpose, that's up to you. It's not up to another data provider that's out there doing it behind your back.
Right. I think that's the key here, is that it's like, if you can permission consent to all these different things, like, I'm giving away this biometric or that biometric because I'm going to do a big transaction, makes sense, or I'm going to get a loan or whatever. Like, but if I'm just entering the stadium, I give them the minimum, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to do it because it makes it easier, and because it's localized and it's decentralized and it's encrypted, and poof, I'm going to totally skip that line where I didn't. That resonates with me a lot. Let's jump into the future. And kind of dig in there a little bit more. So how do you see kind of the space evolving in the next kind of 10 to 20 years? And then from there, like what is that going to unlock? What are we going to see unlock for us? I know digital ID is a huge thing right now, and we're kind of scratching the surface. So I'd love to kind of dig into that a little bit, because it's an important aspect of this. But how do you see the field evolving in the next kind of 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, well, I think, and I don't know about you, Jeff, but growing up, I always had this vision of my Jetson life. And, I think we're finally getting there. I think we're about to get our flying cars, and, we can do the FaceTime and everything else. But as I mentioned, I took the job. I'm like, we can finally realize our Jetson life over the next decade. And really, and I mentioned it earlier, it's really going back to, the movement and non-reliance on devices. So, the convergence of, cloud computing with your digital identity. And we kind of talked a little bit, just a few minutes ago around, where consumers and citizens will have this data and stored, encrypted. But now you can use a biometric out in the real world. That you have control of. So when you do go to open your car, or you're going to go to get some coffee or whatnot, you can use your face, or you can use some other biometric to, conduct the transaction without having a physical wallet, without having a phone. That you just do it with who you are, and so it's really going to help free up a lot of those tethers that we have in today's world, and can really start to do some things. And you can see device manufacturers with the doing glasses and these other things. But the reason I mentioned the ear canal is because I think one of the aspects people may be able to use in the future, as we progress over the next 10 years, is maybe earbuds and using that. But I think within the next 10 years, as we go through this trajectory, we should be able to do 90% of our daily life without anything, just walking around and having that interconnectivity of platforms. So it's a super exciting time, and I'm really excited to be part of it. And I know some of the projects again that we've worked on with you all, is going to help us realize this, come out, and just is going to be, really exciting for people to experience.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Going back to and so the Jetsons life, I just love the vision of that. And, you mentioned not needing, keys or wallets or credit cards, and be able to kind of interact in your day to day, all these little tethers, these little access points, that if we could get rid of those things, which are more and more being tied to our phone, then technology could be invisible. I think, and that's where it's like we've been narrowing all of our view into the mobile device. And I read a few studies that kind of validated more or less the same point. We look at our phones apparently like 350 times a day. It used to be like 95 times a few years ago. And so like more and more our life is like centralized around this thing. Pandemic accelerated it even further. Okay, we're just going to order our groceries now on our little device here. Whatever it is, it's like it accelerated that even further. And yet, and so we're so heads down on these devices. How do we look up and and just have a more natural experience? I think the future is where technology is invisible. But you can't do that unless you pair that with advanced biometrics, right? And it seems like we have all the technology today. We just haven't nailed we haven't quite overcome the fear of using that technology, and then maybe all the usability that kind of makes it so seamless, from kind of enabling all the ecosystem, kind of like, maybe that's akin to kind of the electric car, where it's like, yeah, the technology has been around for a while, but we're just now getting to the point where everyone's sort of getting on board, right? And I don't know if that's a fair analogy, but it seems like that's similar here. It's like, okay, we have all the technology,
yeah,
but we're just now getting to the point where like everything's coming together where we can make some giant strides.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And, there are analysts that are out there. One of them is, Gartner has a wave, and they kind of show, the various elements. So all the things that we talked about, they through their research, they can kind of say within the next 5 to 6 years, this is how it will go. And you look at it and, from someone that's in the market, like that makes sense. And like you said, invisibility, I think is a great way to frame it. But a lot of it is around, consumer acceptance. And, we were talking earlier that, we sell business to business. We don't sell directly to consumers and don't interact that way. But, until the consumer is comfortable and ready to utilize these technologies that are out there, businesses are still gonna wait. So, we do spend a lot of time on that education and just making sure that, like we said, we do it respectfully. We build trust and consent, and make sure that everything is working so people can really start to delve into it. And as you said, let's start getting away from looking at our devices all the time and looking up, because the world's a great place.
Yeah, the world is a great place. And yet I think we've been lost recently. And technology moves so fast, humans don't adapt as quickly. And so I think there's like this promise, I think, on the other side. And it's components like this that enable us to kind of get back to being more human, So I'm really excited about it. But I think generally, if we think about the population at large, I think there is more fear. It's sort of like robotics. It's like people fear robotics, and maybe movies have played into that. But the reality of robotics is like it's much like computers. It's going to help the world. It's going to all the dirty, dull, dangerous, like mundane work that's not really good for the human spirit. Will hopefully be a little bit more. There's going to be some automation, and when the computer came out, people feared that too. And the reality was it changed how people work. We have way more knowledge workers than we do manual laborers. But doing the same mundane thing isn't good for the human spirit in general. Isn't good for humanity. And I think as we think about all these gatekeeping things that restrict our movement, that require all this authentication, that are also being hacked into. And it's like, we all see the hacking instances. Like I get like a yearly, at least once a year, a notification in the mail that someone's going to give me 2 years of free, Experian, credit monitoring because my data has been hacked, by XYZ. And so there's there's millions of honeypots around. And so like, kind of raising the bar, this notion of, I think you mentioned like getting rid of passwords. Like how amazing would that be? Right. But I think we have to we have to get used to the idea that, okay, we're going to share some biometrics, but if we control that and it's decentralized, then why not?
Yeah, no, for sure. And you just mentioned it because I know we talked about, some of the advantages in 10 to 20 years, but I think the biggest change consumers will see just in the next year or two is, getting rid of passwords. And the ridiculous, what was the color of your car that you owned 15 years ago, and the your mother's maiden name type stuff. That stuff is going to go away, and you are going to start to see, especially on your device, and it will be linked to your device, but the use of a biometric to then reconfirm and reauthenticate yourself. But I have a password storage program. I don't know if you do. I'm a little bit of a nerd, but I have 175, I think, unique username and passwords out there to protect myself, and it's ridiculous that we have to do that.
In addition to the conversation we had with our guest on today's episode, we asked another expert to provide their insights on the future.
My name is Tammy Hawkins. I'm Director of Cybersecurity and Fraud at Intuit. I feel biometrics continue to be key to security. Humans simply cannot remember passwords, and we make so many of them. At this point, passwords are not safe. If I cannot remember them, then I make the same one over and over and over again. So what good was it making people have so many passwords to begin with? If I find it in one place and you've used it in 30, my goodness gracious, now I can take over your whole life. That is unsafe. How do we ensure that we are protecting this data? I personally believe currently some of the strongest ways are a combination of using a hardware factor, like a passkey, for something you have as one authentication factor, combined with many other authentication factors, including your fingerprint, your voice, your face, combined with how you behave. Where are you accessing your data and device from? Does it still look like Tammy, even though it's claiming to be Tammy, based on behavior, based on hardware, based on also physical biometrics? This is going to help us replace and get away from using the flawed password.
So what about challenges? We have this great promise of what the future can offer us. But what are some of the challenges you anticipate in kind of getting there?
Yeah, so I think, we talked quite a bit about the consumer side, just the acceptance. I think on the business side, the reason why we're saying this is going to take 10 to 15 years for you to go out and make a payment with your face is that it does require effectively an infrastructure upgrade. So every point of sale terminal now has to be capable of accepting something, be it, have a camera installed or whatnot. So, that's going to be a significant upgrade for retailers, food providers, everything out there. I think we are starting to see that because you're starting to see a lot of great advancements, and I'm sure you know this significantly better than I do, but just around video analytics and virtual reality type things. And, you're seeing more of a movement towards different ways to utilize screens and video out in the real world for shopping experiences and whatnot. So, hopefully we can, be part of that upgrade path to really do it. And, we're having a lot of discussions to kind of enable that. But that's usually when we talked about, the changes and challenges for advanced biometrics that, how do you get a biometric? That's, one of the big things. It's become easier, but, we still have, infrastructure issues that we have to overcome to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some patience required there.
Yeah.
But, it seems like there's like a tipping point with a lot of technology where it's like, okay, I mean, everyone, as soon as they got the face pay sort of thing, it's like, you don't even think about it now. Right. And so there's like a tipping point probably of acceptance. Also, I would say it seems like half the small businesses I'm visiting are asking me to to sign and put in a tip now. And so I'm signing a device that probably could have a camera, or many of them already do, right? Where it's like that could just as easily, be able to enable some sort of biometrics so that, I'm not entering a card. Obviously there's, the Apple Pay aspect, but that may not be, the more we tether to kind of the mobile device, the more we are attached to the 350 times I'm looking at the mobile screen per day. And that just doesn't seem good for for humanity. It's compounded a lot of social issues and psychological, mental issues, being so tethered to something. So how do we untether in a sense? And I think part of the answer is what we're discussing today.
Yeah, it's that, and I do think it is getting into the conversations with these technology providers that are out there and the hardware providers to give them an easy upgrade path. And I think that's sort of been the challenge for a lot of biometrics companies that are out there is getting involved in that infrastructure and having something that's easy and cost effective. Right. And that's, the balance, like any upgrade for technology, is where is that tipping point between cost and money savings. And, why it's good to work in the fraud space is because we have demonstrable proof that we can lower fraud. So you can build business cases and really start that. And I think we are going to start to see over the coming year, to your point, like just walking into a restaurant, instead of having the little screen where you have to sign and do all the tipping, that, it will have a camera. And, you will be able to use your face and start to use that, in select areas. But as people start to become more comfortable, then, we'll start to see that become more ubiquitous and go out. So, I think, to your point, these tipping points, these Malcolm Gladwell type things, we're going to start to see those dominoes fall, over the coming years.
I think we already are.
Yeah.
But I think Apple did a huge favor for the industry for just, kind of slipping that piece of technology, helping people get comfortable with it. But I think the notion that it's localized and you're giving consent is sort of the key on that, because if that can be, part of that future, then I think people are going to be a lot more comfortable with it.
We're heading into another exciting computing revolution. As artificial intelligence improves with amazing breakthroughs like generative AI, I'm sure, like many of you, I've been playing with ChatGPT, and just the amount of value that artificial intelligence will continue to add to our lives, to our products, to our productivity as human individuals is just absolutely mind-blowing. I personally believe artificial intelligence will significantly improve not only our humans' capabilities in a good way, it's going to unfortunately superpower threat actors' capabilities in ways that we may not be proactively considering yet. And one emerging area that I would like to mention is the use of deep fakes. Deep fakes are the use of artificial intelligence combined with biometric samples of video, of photos, of audio, of someone the threat actor would like to pretend to be. There's already published examples of threat actors using video and audio samples to pretend to be a customer of a bank, to get beyond the bank's security controls, which includes physical and vocal biometrics, with the awesome computing power that is coming in artificial intelligence and with quantum computing. With this new threat vector, new security controls have to be considered. And I believe some of those security controls to be considered are doubling down on what I call system-observed behavioral biometrics. Instead of only validating, let's say Tammy sounds like who she says she is, or that she looks like who she says she is, can we also validate that she's behaving the way that she always has? Being able to continue to trust but verify customers in layered ways using biometrics, I believe, is another key in protecting as our artificial intelligence and computing powers become more and more powerful. We should assume that each layer of biometrics will continue to be challenged and routed around by the threat actors. So as always, you have to take a layered approach that utilizes many signals to constantly understand the risk and when you're trusting versus when you need to more deeply verify that someone is who they say they are. and should be doing what they're attempting to do.
I have two more questions for you before we kind of wrap up. One is, who's, you're a leader in this space with all the experience you have, so the vision you have and the pragmatism as well, to be like, hey, it might take us 10 to 15 years to get there, and I'm going to be working on it, but it still might take us 10 to 15 years. We need that. We need the vision, but also, someone who's diligent and patient. What's another leader kind of in the biometrics technology space that you might admire or look to?
Yeah. I'm probably not going to give the most typical answer, but it's a woman named Amba Kak. And the reason she's not a technologist, she doesn't build biometrics, or she's not out there with a company that's pitching it. But she's a legal scholar who's now a senior advisor to the FTC and chairs something called the AI Institute. And the reason Amba is just really really impressive is when we talked about going back earlier just around ethics and use of it, she's very, very pragmatic about her approach, that biometrics from a legal and policy point of view have a place and can help consumers, but ensuring that, keeping organizations like ourselves and other ones that are out there honest. And, like I said, for citizens and consumers to really reap the benefits of all the things we can do, we really need really strong and proactive advocates in the legal and policy realm that are out there that are, helping shape and ensuring that regulations that are going to come down, that have responsible use, that have responsible ethics, and put conditions on us and in a way that ensures that the whole market, really is for the benefit and use. And so, I think she's done some fantastic work. She helped publish about 120-page document or so about 2 years ago, just around guiding principles and also use cases that we've seen. And one also cites, use cases in India as well that you mentioned earlier. So I would, for anyone that's out there, I think she's a great resource to kind of see, how from a legal and policy point of view, this market's developing.
Thank you. Such an important aspect to get this right. It seems like it's one area that if you design it with intent, then there's the great promise. But without, then there could be more of the peril. And so it's one of those things that it can blow up in a good way, but it could blow up in a bad way if you don't have people like Amba that are, and you that are kind of really thinking about all the components that make it a good system. So you truly have that sort of frictionless future. Double clicking on that, and that kind of leads me to my last question is, any other thoughts on doing that? Like, how we design it with intent? You mentioned some of these key principles, but do you have any other thoughts as we think about all the different parties that need to kind of come together? It makes this a little bit more complicated, but you got the business side, you have those representing the consumer, you have the government bodies, but any other thoughts about how we continue to design it with intent, with purpose?
Yeah. We did talk about, right. So we talked about the legal policy aspects and the work that Amba's doing. And we talked some about, the work that we're doing and, some of the specific designs that we do with customers. But obviously the biggest nut to crack is that infrastructure and development. So, there are a couple foundations that are out there. Because one of the problems, and we see this in lots of technology, is the building of silos, right? And there are organizations similar to ours that are out in the market that people see day to day going to the airport, right? You can have a biometric to ease your way through airport security and make it easier. But it can't be used anywhere else unless it's accepted there. And, I think one of the core principles for us is, we want to enable individuals to use their biometric wherever, right? We don't want to put a limitation on doing it just because a business isn't working with us. That doesn't feel right for us. And it's not the right thing for the consumer. So there are a couple foundations that are out there. One's called FIDO, one's called OIX. Linux Foundation just came out with an open wallet to really democratize, a lot of these proliferation of wallets that you see these days. So I think really working, with these open standards bodies to ensure that, with this vision, the Jetson vision, whatever you want to call it, that wherever you're at, it doesn't matter what's working there. You can use a credit card. That way, when you're walking up, you can use, whatever identity piece you want to use, and it's just accepted and it works. And, I think that's the future we have to work for. So like you said, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of people out there, but, I think the market is pretty cognizant of that and is really trying to work towards that future.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great to hear about some of those organizations and that there's, people working on it already, because we need the thinkers around this, not just the builders, but we need the thinkers and those with sort of high empathy for all the different parties we need to bring together.
What we're really observing is an uptick of product abuse across the cybersecurity and fraud space. Now, product abuse is when a threat actor abuses a product for illegitimate gains. For example, a threat actor might use a new social media platform to send harmful content out. Obviously, that's not why the social media platform was designed. It was designed for good actors to send positive content out or useful content out. But unfortunately, there are threat actors in the world, or fraudsters, that will sometimes use a product that was created for one purpose to use it for a different purpose that you didn't intend. So I would encourage, if you can, have dedicated folks or train your folks that you already have on your teams today that are dedicated to thinking about good actors, to think about threat actors proactively and to build, protections against those threat actors. To me, that's how we design with more intent to both protect our customers as well as frustrate the fraudsters and keep them out of our products.
Micah, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for your leadership, your vision, your experience, your knowledge you kind of shared with us today. Loved hearing from you, and look forward to building the future together.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Jeff. Thanks for the time. It's been great.
The Future of Podcasts is brought to you by Fresh Consulting. To find out more about how we pair design and technology together to shape the future, visit us at freshconsulting.com. Make sure to search for The Future of in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. And on behalf of our team here at Fresh, thank you for listening.